and welcome. I'm Peggy Caruso. Welcome back to our Revolutionize podcast. We have a very exciting guest on today. I am the owner of Life Coaching and Beyond. I'm a certified executive and personal development coach. I'm an author of 4 books in my Revolutionize series, the last to be released this fall, and I am an 8-time entrepreneur. So with us today, we have Melissa Mulhollan, who is a high school English teacher. She has been teaching for 27 years. She also took my class. I certify people to become coaches. So she has a strong coaching background as well as a teaching background. So welcome, Melissa.
Hi.
Okay, Melissa, being that you do have a strong coaching background and, of course, 27 years of teaching, very impressive. How do you feel that coaching helps your students?
Well, as you know, when I first came to you, the whole reason that I wanted to become certified as a life coach is not necessarily to coach outside of the classroom, but to use those techniques in the classroom. In the process, as you also know, I learned a great deal about myself and the different things that I needed to fix in order to be able to coach students.
Okay, so let me interrupt you for a minute.
Sure.
Because that's one of my favorite sayings is I always say I work on myself every day.
Right.
I teach NLP, which is Neuro-Linguistics Programming, which you are also going to learn, and relaxation therapy and things like that. So I have a lot of tools and techniques under my belt, but I believe that we as human beings can grow and learn every day and continually change behavioral patterns. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I can't tell my students that they need to be lifelong learners and just have to do with education. You have to be a lifelong learner insofar as how you improve yourself. We're all works in progress. And once we fix one thing, maybe something else will start to slide backwards. And we have to keep, looking at our faults and things that we need to improve on a daily basis. I agree. And so I didn't realize at the time. I thought I was, in great shape there, and I just needed to fix my students. And as you taught me, that I needed to work on myself, because you can't possibly work on other people and help them until you help yourself. Like you had taught us, you have to put the oxygen mask on yourself first. And so I do work on myself every single day, and I put into practice all the things that you taught us to do, as well as incorporating that into my classroom setting. And the reason I think life coaching helps students in the classroom is because a lot of the time we will come up with these fantastic lessons to teach them. And then we can't understand why they fail. And that's why so many teachers are frustrated, so many school officials are frustrated in general, because students don't seem to be retaining the information. They don't appreciate the lessons that you come up with. And unfortunately, colleges teach us that if we come up with these fantastic lessons, everybody's going to want to learn. It's this huge fallacy. And quite honestly, the biggest challenge is to get students to realize that they can learn, and how to take the things that are happening with them in their lives and help them deal with those things so that they can appreciate the lessons that you're teaching them that have to do with the different disciplines, like, the history, the English, math. Because if they come into the classroom and they're worried about what's going on at home, if they're not dealing with the problem that they're having, then their mind is going to be elsewhere. So you can have the best lesson in the world and it just falls by the wayside.
How do you motivate your students if they're unmotivated? That's a very difficult thing to do.
That is a very difficult thing to do. And here's the other thing. One size does not fit all. I think if you and I could come up with a formula that would work for every single student all the time, especially when you're dealing with them in a group, it's not like you're dealing with them one-on-one and able to deal with all the different nuances and the things they're bringing to the classroom. So in a group setting, that's incredibly challenging. But one of the things that I use to motivate them is just to get them to believe in themselves. And some of the things I do to get them to believe in themselves is the idea of autosuggestion. You talked to us about teaching, saying positive things to ourselves, watching that negative self-talk. And so I talk to them about that all the time.
Do you believe that positive affirmations and gratitude help children?
Oh my, yes.
I think they help adults too.
They help everyone. You can't be in the spirit of gratitude. You can't be saying what you're thankful for and smiling and using positive self-talk and be in a bad mood. And so changing someone's mood too also helps them be ready to accept anything that you're teaching them for the day as well.
You said something interesting, like I've done interviews across the United States or across the world for that matter. And a lot of the times the interviewer will say to me, well, okay, Peggy, if you have 2 kids in a lunchroom and they're being bullied, what would you tell those children? And And I always say, you can't just, exactly what you said, you can't just have a canned thing that you do. You have to get to know the person, because if the child is very shy and backwards and you give them something that is a technique that would make them be, extroverted, it would never work.
Right.
They would panic, they would cry. But then you have the person who's very outgoing, and if you gave them something of lesser, then they would have this. It would have the same impact. So you have to get to know the person, their strengths or weaknesses.
Exactly.
And then you incorporate the tools and techniques. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Even if two students are in a fight and you pull one aside and you say, okay, what happened? They'll give you, what happened. And then you pull the other kid aside and they tell you a completely different story. It doesn't mean that one's lying necessarily. They interpret things differently. And that's exactly why you have to, when you raise your children, if you have children, you can raise them the exact same way, and they're both going to take away different things from that upbringing. And so, yes, you have to, and that's why so many different techniques work in the classroom as well, because what's going to work, even with learning, when I'm teaching, maybe taking notes works for one student, and maybe for another student, they need to have the notes given to them. I have some students, we read aloud a lot simply because I have a large number of learning support students, but some kids cannot handle me reading to them all the time. So I change it up. I will put on an audio. I will read to them. Some of them read silently. And then we also take turns in the classroom, because one of those techniques is going to work better for one kid than it does for another. So yes, you have to address each kid differently. And that's hard in a classroom setting, but to motivate them, the idea of getting them to talk positive to themselves, and I speak positive to them. On a daily basis, I will tell them, and unfortunately, I only see them every other day because of the way our schedules are set up, but I say to them, you are great, you are awesome, you are amazing. I start class with that way every single day, because you also know the power of repetition.
Sure, and that's really interesting too, because you understand the developmental periods of a child's life. Yes. And with NLP, which again is Neuro-Linguistics Programming, we figure out behavioral patterns of people, and then we have techniques that help us change those behavior patterns. But it's very difficult, like you said, it's the same in teaching as it is in coaching. The clients come in once a week for an hour. I have them 4 hours a month. Their home environment, if they're in a negative home environment, right, they're around that 24/7, so it's very difficult to come in and say, okay, I'm going to make this huge difference. But you can start by recognizing what is wrong. So how do you do that in a classroom setting? Like in a coaching session, it's different, because that hour is just about me and the other person. And then you start asking questions and learning the behavior and where it came from, and then how to change it. But like you said, you have a whole group of people. How do you begin that process?
Well, I would love to say that I'm successful with 100% of the students, but that's just not the case.
No, it's unrealistic.
It is unrealistic, and if I can reach one through what I'm doing, then I feel like I've accomplished something. And it is impossible for me to know every single kid and what's going on and individualize it. But if I can use the techniques that you taught us in the classroom as a whole, then a lot of the time the kids also understand that I actually care about them, that it's not just me standing up there getting a paycheck and teaching them the lesson and being that robotic teacher. And when you develop that rapport with them and they know that you actually care and that you want them to be successful, then a lot of the time they will actually open up to you about what's going on. When there's some free time, they'll just kind of drop something about their home life. I had a girl the other day who was talking about how we were reading this book, and she said, well, my life's not like that. That's not stressful. It's my birthday, and I'm not even going to get a birthday cake today. Nobody's going to even acknowledge my birthday. So then you start to kind of understand the dynamics of her home environment, and you can gear things more toward that and say, well, what would work for this kid today? And, if this kid's having a bad day, or I know this kid's being bullied, what can I do for that kid today? And so you kind of change it up, just like you do your lessons. You change up your lessons to make sure that you're meeting all the different learning styles of students, and then you change up what you're doing in the classroom to incorporate that positivity and try to reach each kid.
Do you feel as though sometimes it's easier for you to make progress when they come from a bad environment, because then they see the way that you teach and the positivity and the positive affirmations and the gratitude, and then they start to think somebody out there cares? Do you think that is important to bring coaching into the classroom for that reason?
I do. I will say that I've had students who have been so beat down by their home environment and by the people around them that sometimes that positivity actually scares them and rubs them the wrong way.
Sure, they're not used to it.
Right. And so I've actually had kids who have put up a wall because they're not used to somebody saying something nice to them. They're not used to having, hearing positive things. And so sometimes they actually rebel against it. They're few and far between. It's much more beneficial to do it even if you're going to have some of those situations, because quite honestly, you're going to have that situation anyway. That kid's going to be a discipline problem whether you incorporate positivity or not. But I do think that sometimes the kids who are coming from those broken environments are the ones who, really glom on to whatever it is you're saying that can help them have a different outlook.
Do you feel as though bullying and cutting is an issue?
Oh my, yes. Drugs, everything is an issue right now.
I would agree.
And everybody says, well, there were problems years ago too. Yes and no, but the problems have magnified, and social media has opened a whole new way for people to be bullied. Kids that would normally wouldn't have the guts to say things to your face are now able to do it and with anonymity in some cases, and in some cases they hide behind that computer screen and they will say nasty things to kids that they normally wouldn't be dealing with. So I think they're getting more bullying today than ever.
Sure, it's just a different kind.
Absolutely.
I think technology is good and you have to advance with it, but I think you also need to really educate the kids on the do's and don'ts. And do you have a lot of parents that aren't up on technology and the kids are more technologically advanced than the parent? Do you have a lot of that?
Absolutely, especially because our school is a comprehensive vocational technical school where we have shop programs as well as their academics at the school. So we have 3 different computer shops in our school. So these kids are really computer savvy and they're way above even most of us in the, in the classroom. They know things that they can get around all kinds of different protections and blocks, and so yes, they're way well advanced beyond their parents. And parents, quite honestly, some of our parents are so busy working and dealing with their own issues that they just don't take the time or have the time or the energy to check up on what their kids are doing. And so I think, that's another issue in and of itself for our students. But yes, that's the social. Well, one of the things that I've been incorporating the life coaching in the classroom, and it's worked very, very well because I do the auto suggestion. I also do jokes. I tell them a joke at the beginning of the day.
Sure, that's huge. Laughter is key.
Right. Laughing is there's a reason that there's a saying that laughter is the best medicine. And so I tell them a joke at the beginning of class every day. Sometimes they find it funny, sometimes they don't, because it's hard to find jokes that are appropriate for school too. But I do that, and then I have each student write down their goals, short-term, long-term, and then they create a vision board, and then they look at their vision boards while I'm taking attendance. I put on some music from YouTube that is the stress relieving music, and that helps with the timing for them so that they know about how long that 3 minutes is going to be. If it's totally silent, then I found that they tend to kind of look around the room and wonder when that 3 minutes is going to be up, where the music gives us that gauge of how much time. So they do that too.
Sure, you're incorporating some relaxation techniques.
Yes.
And that's really important for the mind.
Yes. And I taught them the breathing exercises, just breathe and picture yourself. And we talk about imagery in English anyway. So I use that with the sensory. Make sure when you're envisioning yourself accomplishing these things, make sure that you can smell the smells and hear the sounds, the whole feel what it feels like to be there wherever it is you might want to be. So I really work with them on that as well. I have positivity quotes painted on the walls in my classroom. I give out positivity quotes every Friday because oftentimes, as you said, you're dealing with a client for an hour once a week and then they're going back into their environment. When kids go home for a holiday break or over the weekend, that tends to be when they slide backwards more.
Sure.
If they're in a negative environment. So I give them those positivity quotes to try to put them in the right mindset before they go home for the weekend or whatever it might be there too.
Do you ever have children reach out to you on a personal level just for advice?
Yes.
Oh, that's interesting.
Oftentimes. Mm-hmm. Even my school has recognized the benefit of me having the life coaching experience because we have 2 guidance counselors, and when they are tied up and there's a crisis, they pull me out of my classroom to actually help with students. So
Well, that's great.
They've seen the value of what I can do. It's also increased my test scores. That's one of the things that I wanted to use it for in the first place. So my test scores went up 8% the one year and 9% the next year. They kind of have leveled out at this point. But I talked to my administration and I said, this is great that I'm incorporating this in the classroom and that you allow me to do that. But wouldn't it be great if we actually had an entire humanities course called Foundations for Life, and where we incorporated all those different things and talked about organizational techniques, coping techniques, taking responsibility for your actions, accountability. And it's a shame that those things aren't being taught in the home, and we can all say, well, that's not our job. But, if the kids are coming to the school and they don't have that, it is our job. So they've allowed me to create that course for next year.
Yeah, I feel like coping mechanisms is a problem for children.
Huge. Parents try to cope for their children.
Right.
That's the biggest issue, And if they would let the kids actually deal with some of these issues, then they would know how to do it. But we've become so overprotective in some cases that it's not good for the kids.
You've been a very interesting guest. If someone were to try to get a hold of you, how could they find you?
They could find me at Jeff Tech. My email address, I'm on the webpage for Jeff Tech, but my email address is M as in Michael, T as in Tom, Mulhollan at Jeff Tech, all one word, lowercase, JEFFTECH.US. You can also reach out to me on my cell phone. My number is 814-590-7904. So if you ever had any questions, I am in the process of writing a book, The Coaching Classroom, how I've incorporated the coaching techniques into my classroom, also some of the things I did to improve myself, and how I've become a lifelong learner as well. So that should be out hopefully very soon.
Well, good. We'll bring you back on when it's out and you can tell people how to get a copy of it.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you all for listening in. Again, I am Peggy Caruso. My book will be available in the fall as well, so maybe Melissa and I will do them together.
That'd be great.
Release them together. So it'll be interesting. I hope you tune in next time. We always have really good guests, and if you need to get in touch with me, you can always go to my website, www.lifecoachingandbeyond.com, and all of my information is there. Thank you, and have a fantastic day.